So we hear you're going to be reading Light in August by William Faulkner. We three have prepared a study guide for chapter 20 to help that process.
Faulkner's pretty good at descriptive writing. In his book Light in August, he has one of the best imageries throughout his book. We already get an imagery from the book's title, Light in August. That light he talks about throughout his chapter is repeated constantly throughout his book. For example, in chapter 20, the line that caught my eye when reading the book out the line was the line, the copper light had completely gone now. The world hangs in a green suspension in color and texture like light through colored glass. This realistic description helps the reader get into Hightower's thought process while looking at the sky after sunset in his study. The image of the book's title is brought up in the sentence when Hightower sits in peace after the violent events that have occurred at his house. As we learn more about Hightower in the chapter, we also get an insight in Hightower's mother's. As Faulkner describes her as the second out was the mother whom he remembers first and last is a thin-faced and tremendous eyes spread of dark hair on a pillow with blue, still almost skeleton heads. Faulkner tries to describe Hightower's mother as a simple woman with brown eyes. He says that her hands are almost skeleton hands, so it tells the reader that the mother was weak while Hightower was growing up. Later we get that she died, as the blue, still, and dark hair on the pillow symbolizes her death was not inevitable.
Since this book was written in 1932, there will be many parts of it that will be super hard to comprehend. And like 4 to 5 words at least every chapter that you probably have never heard of. So I suggest searching them up and Googling them, and like also writing them down in your notebook if you want to go that extra step and write down the definitions so you can remember them for later usage in your life. Be my guest. Some other challenges in chapter 20 are his symbolism, his Faulkner style, the setting change, and also the characters in the chapter are pretty difficult to keep up with. In a good way to like kind of keep track of all those things that I just said is what I did during this semester was we kept a table in our journal of Faulkner words, the characters that were in the chapter, as well as where and when like the chapter was taking place. So that always kind of helped me had a base in where we were, what the main characters in the chapter were, and where we were at basically. And the Faulkner words category was just to keep track of the 2-word combination, because he does that a lot. For example, in chapter 20, he does this with combining the 2 words laying and then on, and he just combines them to be laying on. Also with Faulkner's style, he does stream of consciousness writing. So he represents this by putting the words in italics and not using proper grammar or punctuation. So for example, Hightower wants to get married so he can go to Jefferson. He says, "I see, that's the way it is, marriage. Yes, I see now." This sentence is representing the thoughts of Hightower as he thinks them, because Faulkner's usage of biblical and historical references help to describe Hightower's situation in chapter 20. It may confuse thoughts of Hightower as he thinks them, because Faulkner's usage of biblical and historical references help to describe Hightower's situation in chapter 20. It may confuse those who don't have a religious background. So as you read this book, you will find that most people in this story are influenced by the religions and make decisions based on that. And as someone who has a very minimal religious background, this part of understanding the book was the hardest. So one piece of advice like I can give to like people who don't understand like the Bible and really that type of stuff, what helped me was using the Internet Archive glossary, and this was a free resource that our teacher gave us, so that helped me a ton. Not just with biblical references, but also a whole bunch of imagery that he uses, and metaphors and describing, because every single couple of lines, Faulkner's describing something super articulate. And this resource assisted in the comprehension of basically the religious acts and the symbolism immensely. Another example of the challenges in chapter 20 are the time skips that occur whenever he's sitting there thinking of his past and like his past life, and it's referred to as a reverie, which basically just means a dream. And he's just sitting there basically thinking of his grandfather's past, who fought in the Civil War on the Confederate side. And Hightower is sitting there fantasizing that his grandfather was a war hero who did something heroic, when in all reality he was just shot while doing something pretty stupid. So it goes from him sitting there thinking of that situation to him going to being a little boy, listening to that situation from his slave Cynthia, and it's described in the book how he listens to her now was without terror. It was not even triumph. He listened to it with pride, basically. This flip-flop of the setting can confuse the reader, so it's helpful to take note of this in your notebooks. Also, throughout chapter 20, through his entire dream, throughout the entire chapter, his dream is being symbolized by being a wheel. And so things that cause him turmoil and sadness eventually slow the wheel down to a stop in the sand, because it's representing him not being able to let go of the past, because he's only thinking of things that bring him happiness, and he's misremembering his past and his grandfather's past specifically. And this wheel is basically representing his backtracking to move forward from the past and reconcile his reality. And that's basically the explanation for why Hightower sits there at the study window and looks out at the road, and he bought that house specifically on that road so he could look at the road and imagine his grandfather coming down with his band of Confederate soldiers and doing something heroic and prideful and honorable, is what Hightower was basically dreaming of the entire time. And so you're shown that Hightower he doesn't want to live in reality. So that's chapter 20 challenges. Hope it helped out.
William Faulkner is a complex writer, so it's important to get into each chapter with the mindset of adjusting to each chapter with a fresh perspective. In chapter 20, we get a look at where Hightower came from. This caused a moment in this chapter to go back in time and meet Hightower's grandfather. A straightforward way to adjust to these chapters is to pay attention to the context clues and note what time period we are in. This allows us to better understand each character and chapter from a wider perspective. For example, in chapter 20, we specifically know we are back in time because the war is brought up and Hightower's grandfather is the subject of conversation. Not all chapters are this easy to catch the time jumps, and it might take a few reads to perfect it, but just remember to pay attention to the context clues. Another thing to keep in mind is The Light in August was written in 1932, taking place in South Mississippi, so racism, segregation, hardcore religious beliefs were very, very prevalent and guide a lot of the characters to make the decisions they do. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind while reading this book, because you get a broader perspective of why they're acting like this, why they have these thoughts, and it gives you a better grasp at understanding the book if you can understand what was happening back in 1932.
Thank y'all for watching.
Hope you guys found this video interesting and helpful.
And we wish you the best of luck.